All right. Sorry. All right. We're back for the fourth part of this great consciousness debate. No, this is the fifth part. Oh, man. Okay. Like I said, I'm planning on doing this until at least the end of February. So send me some requests, recommendations. I have a bunch of stuff planned for this. Some people like it, some people don't, but whatever. This is what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and go right into it. They're just about to ask Steve what he thinks the biggest objection to higher order theories is, I think. And we'll see what he says.
Question that
What is the strongest criticism?
okay, yeah, and what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think, for us, I feel like the challenge at the moment is to take what I think is a powerful idea from philosophy, from David Rosenthal and colleagues, about this idea that constitutives to consciousness is some awareness of a mental state, and then
Yeah, so first of all, he's right. This is something I totally agree with. This idea comes from philosophy, probably through David Armstrong, and then David Rosenthal is a very contemporary and well-known defender of it. But definitely, it starts in philosophy. Scientists are just now getting interested in it, but how do you translate that into a neuroscientific principled account? That's very difficult. So I think Steve's exactly right here.
find that down to the level of some working model that we can then derive experimental predictions from. So I totally agree with what's been said about introspection not giving us data on how the system works. I think we then need to have signatures that are not trivial that we can then go and search for that match properties of the model. And one thing two things we're getting interested in along those lines is, for us, absence is a really interesting case, the absence of content, because that nicely dissociates the first order states and the higher order states. So the higher order states should represent the absence of content in the first order level, the low precision of that perceptual model. And there's really interesting single unit work from Andreas Nieder's lab that you get these absence cells, these kind of active representations of the absence of content. So we're pursuing that line in terms of empirical test. And then another thing that I think is critique often leveled at kind of some of the current working models is, and that was I had at the start of the talk, was that currently we've been very focused on this presence versus absence of experience aspect and less on the qualities of experience. But again, a really neat other part of David Rosenthal's original ideas was this notion of a quality space, and how if you combine that with higher order states, you get quite a powerful explanation of the capacity to communicate what an experience is like, and that's what I alluded to at the very end of the talk. And
yeah, I've always been very skeptical of this move. So Rosenthal does defend this quality space theory. So did Austin Clark, who I studied with at the University of Connecticut. The idea that what do you say red is? Well, a lot of people say red's a primitive sort of quality, the redness of red, whereas the quality space theory says, well, you can't say what it is by itself. You have to say that it's red sits in this relational structure similar to pink but different from green in sort of predictable ways that define this overall structure, and the mental qualities are just little nodes in that overall structural space. So that's an interesting idea. I don't think it's required for higher order theories. I don't think it's required at all, actually. I don't know if it's true. Lots of people like this idea. I think they abuse it, though. I think Steve is one of these people who abuses this idea, because what they want to do is say, well, look, you have these qualities. The mental quality of red, it's defined functionally in terms of its relation to other mental qualities. And then you have an awareness of that quality at a higher level. And then you get consciousness. And the redness of red part is supposed to be accounted for by the mental quality. And the I'm aware of it part is supposed to be accounted for by the higher order aspect. In which case, these guys think you don't need some kind of conceptual representation at the higher order level, unlike other versions of the higher order view, like Rosenthal's or my own. So I think that this gets them in the problems, though, in that they just help themselves to this mental quality being phenomenal in the right circumstances. So I've never really been able to understand how it is that you could have something that was this, defined in this way, then attach this awareness functional thing to it, and then you get redness as opposed to blue or something else. So I don't really think the quality space helps them this way. I know I'm not really doing a good job communicating this argument, but if anyone's interested, I got a lot to say about this argument.
I think that opens up a lot of interesting empirical avenues if you can start defining that computationally and then going to, in a sense, search for the mechanisms that might allow relational comparisons of sensory properties. That is
let me push you there, because so imagine I am just starting studying consciousness, and I need to choose my PhD or what problem I'm going to be working on, right? And I hear that Melanie with IIT and like Stan with GNW can even predict the state of consciousness. They have 20 years of research. They can really do a lot of explaining. Like, why would I ever? Like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with that? So why would I ever? I mean, I'm sorry, but
Well, I think in the case of what Melanie was describing, I think we're aiming at very different things there.
They are actually trying to aim. They're literally aiming. They think this is the project of IIT, which might be wrong in terms of the phenomenology starting point, but they are aiming at, like explaining the qualia, right? So why, in essence,
But the last point you were describing about the level of consciousness in PCI, I think that's a different research program to what we.
No, but what I mean is that like in IIT, for instance, in particular, you get the presence versus absence, and also the why. Why an experience feels one way versus another way, and this has been the program from IIT since the beginning, right? So in a sense, like I'm trying to look. I'm really like, thinking of what's wrong that then I need some extra to then explain experience when they have a theory that already seems to.
I see. So she's trying to, in a very awkward way, ask why you should study higher order theory. It's very awkward. So I have my own take on this. Lots of people think that the answer should involve the intuitiveness of something, like awareness being involved in conscious experience, and lots of people find that very intuitive. Lots of people think, gee, how could it just has to be the case that somehow consciousness involves a kind of inner awareness. Like, what would it mean for it not to? Trust me, I've met these people. This is what they think. So other people do not find that so intuitive and think to themselves, what's so wrong about consciousness without awareness of it? So I find that appeal to the intuitiveness of inner awareness to be problematic. It doesn't help because many people don't find it intuitive. So what do you do then? Say, well, too bad for you, is what you do basically, and you silo off. So lots of people are attracted to these because their initial preference is for like higher order stuff or something like that, and then they go and find a place to fit in. On the other hand, I sort of feel like anyone should be interested in working on this stuff, because if you are a beginning student and you are looking where to go, and first of all, if you have your options and you could pick, well, that's a different story. A lot of competition. But however, suppose you think that higher order theories are completely ridiculous and you're a scientist. Well, then prove that they're wrong. These guys aren't doing it. They're looking for evidence for their views. That's one of the critiques I think a lot of people have, is we want to see less emphasis on your own view and more on trying to falsify it and contact with other views. So why not go and show that this ridiculous theory is false? It should be easy. Well, here's a guy who says he'll conduct experiments. Do the experiments. Show that there's something wrong with the view. So that might be one reason to think that you would work on this view, to falsify it. Then you might find out, surprisingly, that it's not false, so maybe you'll become a convert. So I think there's at least those two reasons. One, some people do find it intuitive. Two, if you think it's BS, then show that it's BS. And then three, I would say, we don't know which of these views is right. They have four theories represented here. Nothing about attention. I would put attention in there as a fifth big theory. A camp or base camp where people congregate. So, and we could put panpsychism and idealism here as well, but those aren't really neuroscientific theories of consciousness. These are supposedly cognitive neuroscience theories. There's other ones as well too, like Anyway, the point though is we don't know which of these is the best candidate. So if you're really looking to study consciousness, You shouldn't be trying to find someone who's really super married to their theory and only wants to find evidence for it. You should rather be trying to figure out, like, how do we test any of these theories? What would count as evidence? So I don't think you should be thinking the way she apparently is trying to force Steve into answering, that you got to go and work with the person whose theory you think is right, because we don't know which of these is right. It's a bit ludicrous.
Explain those qualities.
I mean,
Why would I need something extra?
So I think that if you subscribe to the axioms of IT and you believe that consciousness is independent of computational cognitive capacities, then I think that that's a reasonable choice then to go and do your PhD on IT. I just think that like what we offer is a chance to integrate with really exciting developments in other areas of cognitive neuroscience. So we've been thinking about how kind of the grid cell basis set in prefrontal and hippocampus might subserve like the ability to navigate this quality space. Like I feel like we've got a cognitive computational explanation, not an explanation yet, but a way of building a model that nicely integrates with work on decision making, work on memory, and a lot of that is in that nature of use.
I mean, this is Steve's nice way of saying that the higher order camp is at least within the mainstream of cognitive neuroscience, whereas IIT is often thought not to be, because of its emphasis on phenomenology, one, but also on the kind of metaphysical association of the theory, which doesn't really prioritize the role of neurons.
Ecology paper. So yeah. I think that is, we are trying to naturalize consciousness within cognitive neuroscience.
Mm-hmm. But let me, because again, like in the interest of trying to also see like which things can also be combined, right?
Yeah.
Because you could say perhaps IIT is trying to explain why qualia is of a particular way, and then perhaps HOT is trying to explain like why I can then use that information for X, right? But that would be a different explaining. It's not only phenomenology, but it's phenomenology plus something else.
Well, that's what I put up on the last slide, is that I do see a lot of common ground between the notion of a quality space and the kind of maps in visual and extrastriate visual cortex and structural features of those maps that Melanie was talking about. I see a lot of commonalities there.
Yeah, commonalities for him would be these are first order states. So that's again why I guess I should have mentioned another kind of reason for people should be being neutral here is that we don't know if inner awareness is an important part of consciousness. It's not settled. So they think they have their 5 axioms which settle this, and these 5 axioms don't say anything about inner awareness. But why not? We want reasons for thinking that they don't need to include something about inner awareness. So it's not clear that they have good reasons.
I'm now looking at the clock and I see that we have about half an hour, and I do want to ask one of the goals when we discussed this between us. Everything's good there?
No.
What's not?
Victor did this, and I said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "I don't understand you anymore."
Oh, okay. So that's important. So what is not clear then?
No. Well, you asked.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah.
No, you asked why one would need an additional extra added to it to have a conscious representation. And then you said, well, the visual and extrastriate stuff is enough.
It's not sufficient. No, without the higher order state, it's not sufficient. But it could provide that component of, grounding the first order state space that enables these relational judgments that we think are really interesting from the point of view of explaining the functional capacity to say what one experience is like compared to another experience. And Hak Quan Lau has this nice example of the mantis shrimp, where you have a sensory code that is not smooth and sparse. You have all these individual channels. It can do color discrimination, but it can't say that one color is similar to another color because there's not this smooth and sparse code. So I think that's a really interesting case. But in higher order theory, that wouldn't be sufficient. A smooth and sparse code is not sufficient for consciousness. In higher order theory, you need both together in this joint determinism view that we're pursuing.
Well, that's not in higher order theory. That's in their version of higher order theory, by the way. That's a big debate amongst higher order theorists. whether you need the two things put together. I was saying that's what part of the reason for thinking this is very mysterious. But okay, so that the mantis ship is interesting. It can't do color comparisons. Very cool. But what does that have to do with whether it can be conscious? I don't think that's very clear here.
Okay, but isn't that then exactly opposite to what Melanie is saying, and by the way, also what I'm saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay, then we...
Okay, so now that we said...
How is
By
that
the way,
exactly
also what I'm
opposite?
saying?
Yeah. Together in this joint determinism view that we're pursuing.
Oh, that's the, yeah.
Okay, but isn't that then exactly opposite to what Melanie is saying, and by the way, also what I'm saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay, then we...
Okay.
Right, so what's opposite is that you need this extra thing. But what Victor's not quite getting, I think, is that on the Steve and Hakwanah view, it's a joint determination. There's a contribution from the first order state and the higher order element, such that one's total experience is sort of reflective of both aspects. They both make a contribution, as opposed to more traditional higher order theories where it's all at the top level. So that wasn't coming through Rick. I think that's why Victor wasn't clear. He was thinking of this as like a regular higher order thought view, which is not. Steve's view is not.
So now that we settled that, I want to take advantage of the last 30 minutes in order to ask maybe the hardest question. And we all said that it would be great if we could come up with actual experiments that would test these theories and even compare between them. And this is what people have been trying to do, especially in recent years. So what would make you change your mind? So what result, what finding would make you...
Okay, so this is actually a good place to take a break because I must retire to the gentleman's room.